Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Massive new legislation on short-term rentals in BC just announced. We're going to talk about how this is going to affect real estate prices, whether we're going to see a sell-off of short-term rental properties, and how you can navigate this if you're a buyer or a seller. Real quick before we get started, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. I also make content designed to help you make your move in and around Vancouver. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to chat with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below. But regardless, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. Alright, so a few videos ago I talked about how the BC provincial government was working on a new framework of legislation for short-term rentals in an effort to create more rental housing supply. And they've announced those changes, and in fact they are a lot more far-reaching, widespread, and significant than a lot of people thought. I'm going to go over those right now. The major change that we're going to see is that you can no longer, as of May of next year, you can no longer rent out a property short term if it is not your principal residence. Now, one of the things that people mention when this came out is that, you know, in Vancouver, this has already been a requirement that you can't rent out short term a property that is not your principal residence. But part of the changes that were also announced here are compliance measures, because as it stands right now, with that requirement, up to 50% of hosts, short-term property investors, were not following the policy because there was really no way for the BC provincial government to effectively manage who was skirting the rules. So in addition to this, you know, being stretched out to cities right across the province, this principal residence requirement, any city that essentially has 10,000 residents or more that is not exempt by being what is considered a resort city, they all have this principal residence requirement now. And there's going to be measures where the provincial government essentially can follow up and make sure people are following the rules. Now, one of those big measures, and this is what's really going to make it so that it's going to be very tough to get around these rules, is hosts and property owners, they're going to have to upload their business license and business registration number to their listings on Airbnb, VRBO, whatever the site might be. And the provincial government is going to look to the providers to remove listings that don't have these uploaded. And so that's where the teeth of this new legislation comes in. That's where, you know, the people that were skirting these rules in the Vancouver area, that's going to be very difficult to do. So the host providers now are going to have to pull these listings down. Not only that, but they're also going to have to share listing data with the provincial government. And so now the provincial government is going to have a feed of this listing data coming to them. So now they can follow up and ensure compliance as part of the changes, understanding that compliance is really the big thing that's going to make the effect here. The BC provincial government are creating a task force that are going to focus on compliance. And the way they're going to do this financially, and this probably doesn't shock you, is they're going to increase the penalties. So right now it's $1,000 per day per infraction. They're raising that to $3,000 per day. So they're tripling the penalty for anyone that's caught skirting these rules. Licensing fees for short-term rentals, I talked about it on a previous video. They've increased tenfold from around $100 to $1,000. And these fee changes, just so you're aware, these take place immediately. The principal residence requirement doesn't come through until May, but these fee changes happen right away. And the reason for that is so they can build this task force that's going to focus on the compliance. So long story short, when you look at this principal residence requirement, they've basically taken the condo unit, the short-term rental condo unit, out of the picture. That game is no longer owning multiple condo units and renting these out as hotel style investments. That's gone. If you own, for example, a detached home, your principal residence, you can rent one suite out on a short-term basis, whether that is the rental suite below a basement suite or the laneway. So you can do that provided it's your principal residence. Another key change is they've changed the definition of short-term rental. Essentially, we've always looked at that as a minimum 30-day rental. Now it's minimum 90 days. So short-term rental is now defined as 90 days. So when you look at everything put together, principal residence, having to upload the business license, having to upload the registration number, the providers taking down listings, and then obviously the task force and the compliance measures, this is going to carry some significant weight for sure. Across BC, 28,000 short-term rental listings currently. The provincial government expects that this is going to bring 8,000 of those units into the long-term rental market. And really that brings forth the next question from these policy changes. Are we going to see the majority of these short-term rental property owners shift their investments into long-term, get a long-term tenant into the property and move forward? And it's my belief we're not going to see as many as the provincial government is expecting. When you look at the two, we'll call them both business models, but when you look at short-term rental, you look at long-term rental, the only thing that they have in common as a business model is the term rental in their title. Short-term rental is all about cash flow, revenue generation. It's essentially a hotel unit. You have higher management fees, they require a lot of work, your revenue is much higher, your cash flow is much better. Now on the long-term rental side, really here in BC, the play with a long-term rental is you're going to capitalize on appreciation of the real estate asset over time while someone else pays your mortgage. But a lot of these short-term rental operators, they have multiple units out there, they're operating as a business, they're generating cash flow. They're going to take that investment and they're going to put that money into other cash flow generating investments. It's just too different of a model. These guys are not going to want to have to deal with the tenancy laws here in BC, not being able to raise rents appropriately once you have a tenant in there. It's a completely different game. One is more of a short-term game and one is more of a long-term game. So the provincial government expecting that a lot of these are going to convert into long-term rental. I don't think it's going to be as much as they think. And that takes us to the next question everyone is asking. Will there be a sell-off of Airbnb style properties in Vancouver? And the answer is 100% yes. And it's already begun. It's already happening. In the last couple of months, Airbnb approved listings, I guess if you will, have increased. In the last few days in downtown Vancouver, double-digit listings now hitting the market in certain buildings. There are, only select buildings that do allow, based on their strata rules, that do allow for Airbnb, and listings are significantly picking up. And the thing we have to keep in mind and remember here is that there is a deadline. This all has to take place by May. So these listings are picking up. There will be a sell-off of these types of listings. And this is where I see, if you are a buyer of real estate, this is where I see some significant opportunity opening up for you. If you want to purchase a piece of real estate in downtown Vancouver, it's going to be an opportune time over the next 6 months, because these listings are going to be competing with each other as sellers try to liquidate and move on, and again take that money and put it into other assets. So if you're a buyer of real estate right now, you've been thinking about owning in downtown Vancouver, I think there's going to be some buying opportunity. If you look at the prices in downtown Vancouver over the last 5 years, pretty flat. And when I say flat, I mean, where it started 5 years ago and where we are now. There's been up and down movement, but we've ended up pretty much flat. And that's the thing about downtown Vancouver. It's not necessarily a high growth city. You're not going to see massive capital appreciation, but in my opinion, it's one of the safest places you can invest your money when it comes to real estate. There's not going to be big swings up or down. So it's a good store of capital downtown Vancouver. And if anyone's looking to purchase for the long term, and you've maybe just been looking for that opportunity to get in at a decent price, especially considering where interest rates are and where buyer activity is currently, it's slower right now. So you can actually ease in to some of these properties. There's going to be more supply. Some of these one bedrooms are starting in the high 6s, low 7s, not outrageously priced for downtown Vancouver. So as a buyer, this is what I'd be watching for. And in fact, I'm watching these buildings very closely for a couple of my clients to make sure if any opportunities pop up, and if any opportunities pop up, to be able to negotiate against a couple sellers, etc., to get a better deal for the buyer. We are looking at those types of opportunities. So I do think that pricing is actually going to come down definitely in select buildings in downtown. Good opportunity there. Now, if you're a seller, perhaps you own one of these Airbnb short-term rental style properties, it's not that terrible of a situation for you. And I say this because, the one thing that is very beneficial for you selling one of these types of properties, if you're going to do it in the next few months, is you are selling a vacant unit. So what that means is your buyer, it can either be an end user or it can be another investor, and the investor can place a new tenant, long-term tenant in there at some of the highest rates, rental rates across Canada. Downtown Vancouver carries some of the highest rental rates. So on a long-term rental perspective, I'm not going to tell you that you're going to be able to cash flow, but when you're buying the unit, say in the 700s, and you're renting it out for $2,900, $3,000 a month, and you're going to rely on that being a long-term hold for you, there are worse places that you can purchase real estate for rental purposes. So again, you're selling a vacant unit. You have multiple types of buyers, the end user and the investor. You do want to make sure, though, that you're working with an agent that has separate marketing plans for the end user and for the investor, because they're not in the same places. And it's really important, especially if you're up against other properties, that your property is shown to the most amount of buyers. So you're not in that negative of a situation, I would say. And the truth is, for a lot of short-term rental investors, if they've had their properties for some time, the way that they will be looking at it, they should be looking at it, is they've generated revenue over the years. And while they may not receive the capital appreciation when they sell, hopefully that revenue and that net income that they achieved is going to soften any sort of blow. And in fact, they should still be up because some of the revenue has been so great. So circling back to the changes that have occurred, who are the real winners here? Hotels, absolutely. Big winners, with condos basically being taken off the market. Are we going to see inflated prices on the hotel side for hotel stays, especially those maybe mid to longer term stays? Unfortunately, I think that's yes. Is that going to affect the tourism industry? Yes, I think it will. So, these are changes that are not just happening in Vancouver and BC. Federal government is now talking about imposing their own short-term rental changes. They've in fact patted BC on the back for stepping up and doing it first. We've talked about on my channel how this is happening in New York, San Francisco, also happening overseas as well. So this is not strictly to BC, but BC did take quite some significant measures in terms of how they're going to regulate this moving forward. In terms of communities again that are excluded, Whistler is a community that's considered a resort community, so that gets excluded from the rules. But several cities in Vancouver Island, in the interior, you have Kelowna that's on this list as well. And our understanding is that these rules supersede any sort of zoning that's in place. So if the zoning says you can do short-term style rentals, these rules will supersede that. And the way the provincial government has said it is municipalities are welcome to adopt these rules. They have to adopt them if there's 10,000 plus residents, but then they're welcome to raise the bar. They're welcome to go above and beyond and add their own bylaws on top. I don't think that's going to happen, but this is going to be the new normal when it comes to short-term rentals. Definitely going to affect the market. So there you go, guys. I hope that you learned something in this video about all the changes that are coming forth with short-term rentals. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it out to more people so they can also learn from it. And if you enjoy this weekly real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. And lastly, if you're in the Vancouver area or the Fraser Valley, you want to talk to me one-on-one about your real estate situation, you can book me for a free call, or you can just send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever works for you. I'd love to chat with you one-on-one. But outside of that, I want to thank you so much for joining me again this week, and I look forward to seeing you in next week's video.